She texted, "If you really loved me, you'd sell that watch your dead dad gave you so I can fix my body before the wedding. No man wants a saggy bride." I checked my vault cam and saw the box was already gone. When the pawn shop manager handed me the paperwork with her mom's ID. "My name's Patrick Collins, 33, electrical engineer, living just outside Columbus. I don't live a flashy life. I save, I plan, I build. The one luxury I own is a Rolex Submariner that belonged to my dad. He'd worn it every day for 27 years until cancer took him. It wasn't just a watch, it was everything he stood for. Responsibility, effort, pride in earning, not asking. When he passed, he left it to me with a short note that said, 'You don't sell time. You use it.'" Lydia never understood that kind of sentimentality. My fiancée was beautiful, no doubt, blonde, sculpted, glowing in every photo. But she lived for image. She was the kind of person who called herself low maintenance, while booking 5 beauty appointments a week. I loved her, or at least I thought I did, because she brought color into my structured life. But deep down, I always knew she had a dangerous relationship with appearances. The message came on a Wednesday morning. I was finishing a conference call when my phone buzzed. It was Lydia. "If you really loved me, you'd sell that watch your dead dad gave you so I can fix my body before the wedding. No man wants a saggy bride." I stared at the words for a good minute, wondering if this was one of her dark jokes. She had a cruel sense of humor sometimes, but this felt real. My first instinct was disbelief. Then a slow, hollow ache started in my stomach. Not because of the request, but because I suddenly realized she didn't see that watch as a memory, just as a lump of cash sitting in a box. I typed and erased a dozen replies. In the end, I just wrote, "You're joking, right?" She sent back a photo of herself in a mirror, wearing workout clothes, captioned, "Do I look like I'm joking? I want to feel confident walking down that aisle." Something in me shifted. A line I hadn't known existed suddenly appeared. But I didn't reply. I put the phone down and tried to focus on work, pretending I could file that message away like any other irritation. By the afternoon, she texted again, asking if I'd thought about it. I didn't respond. She stopped messaging after that. I thought that was the end of it. That night, I opened the small wall safe in my home office, the one only I had the code to. Inside were my father's documents, a few savings bonds, and the watch box. I don't know why I checked. Maybe instinct, maybe paranoia. When I opened it, the box was gone. At first I thought I'd moved it. I pulled everything out, papers, old files, even the envelope with my birth certificate. Nothing. Then I noticed something else. The camera light on the ceiling, the tiny blue LED I'd installed for security, was blinking faster than usual. That meant there was motion footage stored. I sat down at my desk and played the last 12 hours. Around 2:35 p.m., while I was in a meeting, Lydia appeared on the feed. She wasn't sneaking. She walked straight into the office, phone pressed to her ear, talking casually. She opened the safe like she'd done it 100 times. She didn't even hesitate. She took out the watch box, glanced around once, then slipped it into her gym bag and left. I watched the footage 3 times. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from the clarity of it. No misunderstanding. No, maybe she borrowed it. She took it. I called her. No answer. I texted, "Where's the watch?" 10 minutes passed. Then came the reply, "What are you talking about?" I sent her a screenshot from the footage, just her hand on the safe. She read it immediately, but didn't answer. Then the typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Why are you spying on me? Don't you trust me?" The irony made me laugh, a short, dry sound I didn't recognize. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the app linked to her car's GPS tracker, something I'd helped her install after she complained about losing her keys too often. The last address it showed was downtown, near a strip of shops. I zoomed in. The nearest business to that ping was a pawn shop called Mendez Gold and Loan. The next morning, I drove there before work. It was one of those cluttered, dim places that smelled like dust and old carpet. The man behind the counter, mid-50s, balding, friendly enough, asked if he could help me. I told him I was looking for a watch that might have been sold recently, described it in detail, down to the engraved initials. RC. Time well spent. His eyes flicked up at that. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I remember that piece. Came in yesterday afternoon. Real nice vintage. You a collector?" I said something vague about looking to verify ownership. He hesitated but eventually pulled out the record book. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear him flip pages. Then he stopped. "Here," he said, pointing. "That's the one. Seller name, Patricia Mills. Lydia's mother." For a second, I thought it had to be a coincidence. Maybe another Patricia Mills. But then he slid over the photocopy of the ID used. It was her. Same face, same signature. Except I knew Patricia hadn't been in town for months. I leaned closer. "She came in personally?" I asked. He frowned. "Didn't look like her. now that I think about it. Younger woman. Same last name, though. I figured maybe a daughter using mom's ID. Happens sometimes. We always take the doc and sign-off form, so it's on file. I thanked him and left, heart still hammering. Outside, the air felt heavier, sharper. Lydia hadn't just stolen my father's watch. She'd faked an identity to do it. Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. Her social media was full of posts about new beginnings and self-investment. A photo of a clinic brochure peeked out in one of her stories, a cosmetic surgery center 2 towns over. The deposit amount she bragged about matched almost exactly what the pawn shop listed as payout. For the rest of the day, I couldn't work. I just sat in silence, replaying our past 2 years. The expensive vacations she'd insisted were once in a lifetime. The designer shoes that always seemed to appear without explanation. The times she'd called me stingy for refusing to upgrade her car while she'd barely contributed to rent. I'd excused it all as vanity. But now I realized it was something else. Entitlement so deep it didn't even register as wrong to her. That night, she came home cheerful, carrying takeout. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing happened, talking about her bridesmaid fitting. I said nothing. I nodded, smiled, even laughed when she mentioned how expensive adulthood was. She didn't notice a thing. Later, while she showered, I went back to the vault and replaced the footage file with a backup hidden on my cloud. Then I sat down and wrote everything I remembered, dates, times, what she said, what I saw. I wanted it in writing. I didn't know why yet, but some instinct told me I'd need it soon. Around midnight, as she fell asleep beside me, her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. A message preview lit up the screen. It was from someone labeled Drive In. It read, "Received deposit. Remaining balance due next week before operation." I turned my head toward her. She slept peacefully, breathing slow, one arm draped over me like nothing in the world was wrong. I lay awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling, realizing the truth my father had tried to teach me in a single sentence. The measure of a person isn't what they say about love. It's what they do when they think no one's watching. And Lydia had just sold his memory for silicone and vanity. The next day, I made my first quiet move. I contacted the pawn shop again, this time under my full name, and told them the item was stolen property. They said they'd need an official report before they could release or hold it. I thanked them and hung up, then sat down at my desk and began writing a statement. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel angry or heartbroken. I felt something colder, clearer, like the air right before a storm. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything in my life started to collapse and rebuild, all at once. For the next few days, I acted as if nothing had happened. Lydia was all smiles again, floating around the house humming songs, talking about centerpiece colors and photographers. She probably thought her text about selling the watch had been forgotten. But while she was planning the wedding, I was planning something else entirely. I spent my nights combing through everything she'd done in the past month. Bank statements, credit card logs, email confirmations. I found a $2,500 charge labeled as consultation fee from the cosmetic clinic she'd posted about, followed by smaller withdrawals that matched the timeline of the pawn transaction. She hadn't just used my father's watch. She'd planned this for weeks. I wanted proof solid enough to make denial impossible. So I drove back to the pawn shop the following evening. Harvey, the manager, recognized me immediately. I told him I was following up on the stolen watch, that I had evidence of unauthorized use of identification. His demeanor changed quickly. He printed the paperwork again and signed a statement verifying the ID used and the transaction date. I thanked him, then asked if he could extend the hold period on the item until authorities contacted him. He said he could, for 7 days. That would be enough time. When I got home, I sat in my car for a while before going inside. Through the living room window, I could see Lydia on the couch, scrolling on her phone, a face mask on, watching some influencer talk about manifesting self-worth. It was almost comical. She'd pawned the symbol of everything I respected for a surgery she didn't even need. That night, while she was asleep, I opened our shared laptop. She never logged out of her email. I searched for the clinic's name. Hundreds of messages popped up. In one, she bragged to her friend Alicia. "He'll never even notice it's gone. He's too sentimental to check." Then, later, "I deserve to feel perfect at my own wedding. He should be grateful I'm doing it for us." I sat there staring at those words, feeling something deeper than anger, disgust. It was the first time I saw her the way strangers probably did, a person whose reflection meant more than her relationships. The next morning, I made my second move. I started pulling money out of our joint account. Carefully, small amounts at first. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. I had no intention of taking everything yet, but I wanted her to feel secure while I prepared. I opened a new account in my name only, transferred my paychecks, and changed the auto payment settings on every shared bill. By the time she'd notice, everything of mine would be protected. Later that week, I drove to visit her mother. Patricia lived in Dayton, about 2 hours away. I told Lydia I was checking on an engineering project near there, which wasn't entirely untrue. When I arrived, Patricia welcomed me like family. She loved me, said I grounded her daughter, gave her stability. I didn't have the heart to tell her that her daughter had used her identity to commit a felony. Not yet. Over coffee, Patricia mentioned how Lydia had always been dramatic growing up, how she'd throw tantrums when she didn't get what she wanted. Once, in college, she'd taken her boyfriend's credit card to buy plane tickets to Miami and only admitted it when confronted. She cries, apologizes, then somehow makes you feel guilty, Patricia said, half smiling. She's charming that way. I asked gently, has she ever lost her ID or had it stolen? Patricia laughed. Oh, plenty of times. That girl misplaces everything. I left soon after. A few hours later, as I was driving home, my phone rang. It was Patricia, her voice trembling. Patrick, she said, my bank just called. They said a pawn account with my name was flagged for suspicious activity. I've never done that in my life. What's going on? That was the confirmation I needed. Lydia hadn't just pawned my father's watch. She'd used her mother's name to do it. I told Patricia I'd look into it and call her back. That night, Lydia came home late, giddy and glowing. She'd spent the day finalizing spa bookings with her bridesmaids. She kissed me, asked about dinner, and started talking about how she couldn't wait to feel like a new person. I nodded and smiled, the same calm expression I'd practiced in the mirror all week. She had no idea I already had everything: footage, receipts, the pawn manager's signed statement, and now Patricia's phone call. The next day, I filed an official report with the police. I didn't press charges yet. I just wanted the record created in case things escalated. The officer who took my statement, a tired man named Stewart, said it was smart to document it early. People like that usually double down before they admit anything, he said. I didn't disagree. By Friday, I had enough evidence to end it all. But something inside me stopped short. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the urge to see just how far she'd go if I said nothing. So I played along. When Lydia mentioned the watch again, saying she'd been thinking maybe it's time to let go of old grief, I told her I'd considered selling it for her happiness. Her eyes lit up, and she hugged me tightly. For the first time in weeks, she was affectionate. She started cooking again, calling me my rock, posting photos of us with captions about true love and sacrifice. Every gesture felt rehearsed, transactional. I let her think I was falling for it. Behind the scenes, I was still building the case. I met with Harvey once more, this time recording his verbal confirmation that Lydia matched the woman who pawned the watch using her mother's ID. He even remembered the fake story she'd given, that her father's old watch made her sad, and she wanted to let go before her wedding. Each piece of the puzzle fit perfectly. Every lie she told added another nail to her own coffin. Then came the weekend. Lydia's card declined at the clinic when she tried to pay the balance for her surgery. She came home furious, tossing her purse on the counter, complaining that the bank messed up. She spent an hour on the phone yelling at customer service, never realizing that I'd already separated our finances. After she hung up, she turned to me, suddenly sweet again. You didn't actually sell the watch yet, right? I shrugged, thinking about it. Her smile was pure relief. Good, because that'll cover it. It's just a temporary block on my account. That night, she posted an inspirational quote about trust being the foundation of love. I couldn't help laughing when I saw it. But even as everything lined up in my favor, I couldn't shake a strange heaviness. Part of me still wanted her to show remorse, not because it would change anything, but because it would mean she was human. That hope vanished 2 days later when Patricia called again, this time crying. She told me Lydia had transferred $800 from her account using online access she wasn't supposed to have. She said it was an accident, but I know my daughter, Patricia whispered. She's lying. That was when I decided it was over. Not emotionally. It had been over since the moment she pawned the watch, but practically. I gathered all my documentation, put it in a folder labeled Asset Protection, and locked it in my desk. I started moving my valuables to a storage unit under my name. That Sunday evening, Lydia came to me on the couch, acting affectionate again. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "You really do love me, don't you?" I said yes, watching her reflection in the TV screen, her satisfied smile, the smug tilt of her head. She thought she'd gotten away with everything. When she fell asleep that night, I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no attachment. Just clarity. I knew what I'd do next, and I knew it would crush her world. She thought she'd taken something irreplaceable from me. But what she didn't realize was that I was about to take something from her that she valued even more, her image. And I wouldn't have to lift a finger to do it. She'd do it to herself. By the time the next week began, Everything was in position. I had evidence stacked like dominoes. The vault footage, the pawn receipt with Patricia's stolen ID, the pawn shop manager's signed statement, and even screenshots of Lydia's clinic emails. But instead of using it immediately, I wanted her to reveal herself, to see how far she'd keep lying when the walls began closing in. Her surgery date was approaching fast. She'd been counting down like it was Christmas morning. But when she tried to confirm her appointment, the payment bounced again. She called me in a rage. Her voice was sharp, brittle. "What did you do with our money?" she demanded. "Our money," I repeated. "You mean the joint account you emptied when you pawned my father's watch?" The silence on the line was deafening. I could almost hear her heartbeat through it. Then came the fake laugh, soft and shaking. "You're being dramatic. I didn't pawn anything. Why would you even think?" I cut her off. "Because I was there, Lydia. I spoke to the pawn shop manager. I saw the paperwork with your mother's ID. I saw you on my vault camera." For the first time since I'd known her, she had no words. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked, trying to pivot into victimhood. "I didn't mean to steal it, Patrick. I was going to buy it back after the procedure. I just wanted to feel better about myself before our wedding. I did it for us." There it was again, that twisted logic she used to make her selfishness sound noble. I didn't shout. I didn't even raise my tone. "You did it for yourself," I said quietly, and hung up. That night, she showed up at my house unannounced. Her face was red from crying, but her eyes were still calculating. She came inside, saying she just wanted to talk like adults. I let her. She launched into a half apology, half performance. Tears, shaky voice, promises about how love makes people do crazy things. Then she tried one more tactic, seduction. She put her hands on my chest, whispered that we could move past it, that it doesn't have to ruin everything. It might have worked on someone else, but I saw the manipulation in every flicker of her expression. She wasn't sorry. She was terrified of losing control. I walked her to my office. On the screen was the paused video, her hand opening the safe. "You don't get to gaslight me anymore," I said. "You have 48 hours to tell your mother and the police what you did, or I'll do it for you." Her mask shattered. She stepped back, face pale, voice trembling. "You wouldn't." I said nothing, just pressed play. She watched herself on the feed, silent, then turned and ran out without another word. The next morning, she was gone. Her phone disconnected. I assumed she'd gone home to Patricia, maybe to cry her way out again. I was wrong. By that evening, Patricia called me, frantic. Lydia had shown up hysterical, spinning a story about me being controlling and emotionally abusive, saying I'd planted fake footage to ruin her life. But Patricia wasn't buying it this time. She'd already spoken to the pawn shop after the fraud notice from her bank. The manager confirmed everything. Lydia had used her ID and pawned the Rolex. By the following day, Lydia was under investigation for identity misuse. The pawn shop turned over the paperwork, and the detective handling the case called me for verification. I sent all the files, every screenshot, every timestamp. Within hours, it was official. The watch was being held as evidence, and Lydia was listed in the report as a suspect. She must have found out, because that night she started flooding me with emails, some apologizing, some threatening, some begging. I ignored them all. 2 nights later, around 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert from the security app. Motion detected in the garage. I opened the live feed. Lydia, stumbling in heels, trying to force the side door open with a screwdriver. Her makeup was smeared, eyes wild. I called the police immediately, stayed on the line, and watched her on the screen as she finally broke the small window near the handle. When she crawled inside, I hit the garage light. She froze under the sudden brightness. By the time I opened the main door, the cops were already pulling up. She started screaming, accusing me of ruining her life, of turning everyone against her. I didn't say a word. When the officers restrained her, she tried to break free, yelling that I owed her forgiveness. One of them turned to me and whispered, "You did the right thing calling." They charged her with trespassing and property damage. Patricia bailed her out the next morning, but refused to let her come home. For the first time, Lydia had nowhere to hide. The engagement was officially over. I thought that would be the end of it, but the fallout was worse than I expected. Lydia's cosmetic clinic found out about her arrest from the public records site and canceled her surgery permanently. Her social media followers, nearly 20,000, noticed she disappeared for a week and began speculating. Then someone found the local news article about the pawn shop fraud involving wedding funds. Even though her name wasn't listed, the timeline matched too perfectly. Within days, people connected the dots. By the end of the month, every sponsorship deal she had was gone. Her brand partnerships posted statements about severing collaboration due to ethical concerns. I didn't take pleasure in her humiliation, but there was a grim justice in watching her reputation crumble, not because I exposed her, but because she'd built it on deceit. Still, she tried one more time. A week later, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a handwritten letter that began, "You destroyed me." She wrote about how I'd embarrassed her, how no one respected her anymore, how she hoped I could live with the guilt of turning love into revenge. She ended it with, "You didn't deserve me at my best, and you couldn't handle me at my worst." I almost laughed. That line wasn't hers. It was from a quote she used to post on Instagram. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and never replied. A few weeks later, Officer Stewart called to tell me the investigation was being wrapped up. Lydia had accepted a plea deal, probation, and restitution. The Rolex would be returned once the case closed. I thanked him and hung up, feeling something strange, not joy, not satisfaction, just closure. When I finally got the call to pick up the watch from evidence, it was a gray, rainy afternoon. Harvey, the pawn shop manager, was there too, shaking my hand as he handed it back. "Glad it's back where it belongs," he said. I looked at the old Submariner, still gleaming under the dull light. It had survived theft, lies, and betrayal, just like I had. As I drove home, I realized something. Lydia had wanted to fix her body. But it wasn't her body that needed fixing. It was the hollow part of her that mistook greed for self-worth and manipulation for love. And there's no surgery in the world that can fix that. The months that followed felt eerily calm. The chaos Lydia brought into my life had finally gone quiet, leaving behind an unfamiliar kind of peace, the kind that feels heavy at first because your mind doesn't trust it yet. For years, I had lived inside her orbit, constantly adjusting to her moods, her wants, her endless performance of being the perfect couple. Now the silence was absolute. No phone buzzing, no slammed doors, no nervous laughter when I confronted her lies. Just me, the hum of my computer, and the sound of my life getting back on track. The court process took time. Lydia's lawyer tried to downplay everything, said she'd been emotionally unstable, that it was all a misunderstanding over pre-wedding stress. The judge wasn't buying it. The pawn shop manager testified, the signed paperwork was presented, and Patricia herself stood in court confirming that her daughter had used her ID without permission. Lydia kept her head down, mascara streaking, occasionally looking back at me as if she expected me to swoop in and defend her. I didn't. She pleaded guilty to unauthorized use of identification and trespassing. The sentence, 12 months probation, a fine, and mandatory counseling. The Rolex was returned to me after the hearing. When the officer handed it back, still sealed in an evidence bag, I felt an odd mixture of victory and grief. It was as if my father's memory had gone through a war it never deserved. Patricia stopped me outside the courtroom that day. Her face looked older, lined with exhaustion and guilt. She said softly, "I don't know what to say to make this right, Patrick. I raised her better than this. I really thought she'd grow out of it." I told her the truth, that Lydia's choices were her own. "You don't need to apologize for what she did," I said. "She needed someone to tell her no a long time ago. I just happened to be the one standing there when she hit the wall." Patricia nodded, eyes glistening. A few weeks later, she mailed me a letter. Inside was an apology again, but also something else. Photos of Lydia as a teenager, holding her mother's jewelry. Heirlooms that Patricia now realized were gone. She pawned them, too, the note read. "Years before she met you. I only just discovered it." It stunned me. Lydia hadn't changed because she never learned to face consequences. Every time she did something wrong, someone rescued her. Parents, friends, men. I had simply refused to join that list. Her life unraveled quickly after the court case. Word spread in her social circles, not because I told anyone, but because the internet always finds its prey. The beauty clinic dropped her from their influencer list. The boutique she modeled for cut her out of their campaigns. Her self-love page went from thousands of followers to a few dozen angry comments. When I checked out of curiosity months later, it was gone entirely. Meanwhile, I quietly sold the house we'd shared. I didn't want to keep a single wall that had heard our arguments or laughter. I moved into a downtown apartment with plain white walls and a view of the river. Small, clean, mine. One day, while organizing my new place, I opened the safe and took out the watch. I hadn't worn it since the day my father passed. The metal was cool against my wrist, still ticking like it had never stopped. I looked at the engraving again. RC, time well spent. I thought about what that meant now. Time well spent wasn't about money, love, or appearances. It was about clarity, knowing who you are when everything you thought mattered gets stripped away. That evening, Patricia called again. She'd started therapy herself, trying to untangle her guilt. She said Lydia was living in a small apartment outside Dayton, doing odd jobs. She wanted me to know that her daughter had tried reaching out, but Patricia had cut contact. "She needs to learn that forgiveness doesn't come before accountability," she said. I respected her for that. Patricia didn't know me anything, yet she was doing the hard work her daughter never could. A month later, I received one final message from Lydia, a long email sent at 2 in the morning. She wrote about how no one believed her side, how she'd been punished enough, and how love shouldn't end because of one mistake. She claimed she'd gone to therapy, that she was learning to value honesty. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because I didn't believe a single word. Every sentence sounded rehearsed, crafted to tug at pity rather than truth. People like Lydia didn't change because they felt remorse. They changed only when they had no one left to manipulate. Weeks later, Officer Stewart called again, this time about closing out the restraining order. She hasn't violated anything, he said. Seems like she's keeping her distance. You can rest easy. For the first time in a long time, I actually did. I kept working, rebuilt my savings, started running again after years of neglect. Life began to feel normal, maybe even better. But there were still moments when I'd see something, a photo, a place, a smell, that brought back flashes of her laughter or her perfume. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just disappear. It lingers like a faint bruise you forget about until you bump into it again. But over time, the sting faded. I learned to stop replaying the what-ifs. What if I'd never installed the camera? What if I'd confronted her earlier? What if I'd given her another chance? Every one of those questions led to the same answer. Nothing would have changed. She would have found another way to take, to twist, to justify. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a university event about project management. I almost declined, but something told me to go. Afterward, one of the students came up to me, a young guy, nervous but enthusiastic, and said, "You seem like someone who's been through a lot but still trusts people." I smiled, thinking about it. "I do," I said, "just not blindly anymore." When I got home that night, I opened the safe again, took out the watch, and this time, I wore it. Not as a symbol of the past, but as a reminder that trust, like time, can't be pawned or bought back once it's gone. Later, I received one last update from Patricia. She said Lydia had left Ohio altogether. Rumor was she'd moved to Arizona, working at a salon under a different name. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. Everyone ends up where they belong, eventually. As for me, I kept the watch locked away most days, except on important ones, days that actually deserved to be measured. The last time I wore it was on the morning I signed the final sale papers for the house. The realtor congratulated me and asked if I was happy to move on. I looked at the old Rolex glinting under the light, thought about my father, about Lydia, about everything that watch had survived, and said the first honest thing I'd said to anyone in months. I already have. Then I walked out into the bright afternoon, the weight of the past finally gone from my wrist, but not from my mind, because some reminders aren't meant to hurt. They're meant to keep you awake. And that watch, ticking steadily against my skin, was the sound of time well spent.